So I'm going to have you look at your boundaries like your own personal rules of engagement.
I had no concept, no idea, and that it's healthy, and it's just changed my life.
We're raised in societies and family systems that it's less problematic for other people if we have bad boundaries. Then we're malleable, we're manipulatable, we are someone that doesn't cause a problem, so to speak. And having disordered boundaries, you also have an unsatisfying life. Because to change, we have to tolerate being uncomfortable.
Terri Cole is a licensed psychotherapist, a global relationships and empowerment expert, and the author of Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. For over 2 decades, Terri has worked with a diverse group of clients that includes everyone from stay-at-home moms to celebrities to Fortune 500 CEOs. She has a gift for making complex psychological concepts accessible and actionable so that clients and students achieve sustainable change. She inspires over 800,000 people weekly through her blog, social media platform, signature courses, and her popular podcast, The Terri Cole Show. She has appeared on popular shows such as The Doctor, NBC News, as well as being featured on Real Housewives and hundreds of podcasts. She is a contributor to major publications including Well and Good, Oprah Daily, and has been highlighted in People magazine, New York Times, Woman Day, Vogue, and that's just a few. So welcome, Terri Cole. I'm so glad you could be here.
Well, thanks, Tara Wolf. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yes, great. Well, Terri, I always want to talk about how you got into this and how you mentioned that you went from a boundary disaster to a boundary master and how that's inspired your work. So give us the cliff notes.
Well, clip notes is this. Nobody teaches us how to draw boundaries. So I was like everyone else who was raised to be a good girl. Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So most of us were taught that. So in my young life, I was really a people pleaser, looking for a lot of external validation. And it's funny, I didn't realize, I really thought when I started therapy, got into therapy in my 20s, I really thought it was everybody else. I was like, if those people would just get it together, everything would be fine. And of course, my therapist was eventually like, let me see, what is the common denominator in all of these situations? That would be you. So I learned that I even could draw boundaries by being in therapy. I didn't even know that was a possibility. I really thought it was all about going along to get along. And I was so caught up in wanting to be perceived as nice. I didn't want anyone to be mad. I didn't want anyone to be upset. And so I realized in my own career, once I became a psychotherapist, that obviously it wasn't just me who had those experiences. Then every one of my clients, no matter what their presenting problem was, they would eventually, we would just follow the dots backwards to the fact that they had no idea how to establish and enforce healthy boundaries in their relationships. So they were exhausted. They were burnt out. They were angry. They were overgiving, overfunctioning, overfeeling, doing all the things for all the people, but then feeling bitter. And I was like, oh, this is a boundary issue. And this crap is an epidemic. Like nobody knows how to do it. So I really knew. And I didn't write this book. I've been a therapist for almost 27 years. And I actually didn't write this book until I was a therapist for over 20 years. I really wanted to, A, make sure that what I had to say was valuable enough to write a book, and B, that to be able to have enough life experience and have seen the same thing over and over and over to be like, this is not an exception. This is the rule. This is how women are relating to boundaries. So that's really what happened for me, but how it then inspired me, because learning to set boundaries completely changed my life in a positive way, made me take so much more responsibility for myself, my decisions, how I feel, rather than, because when you're a boundary disaster, there's a lot of a tendency, the ability to sort of blame other people for how we're feeling. And once I really got it, hey, my life, my decisions, my choices, my limits. And then I decided that we didn't have any good books to teach us how to do it in a really accessible way. And so with that in mind, I started a course. I taught that course for over 5 years before writing the book, again, to be like, what actually happens? What actually helps? What concepts do people grab onto and go, oh, this I understand. So that's how I went from being a boundary disaster to a boundary boss.
Nice work. It's really
Well,
neat how
thanks.
you took your own experience, you grew, you recovered, and then you've helped people in that field, and now you're inspiring so many. That is really neat. So wonderful. Well, for me personally, I actually met Terri's work on her podcast. And after my 20 years of domestic abuse, I had no, I would, I had no idea the ideas of boundaries, how I could actually have wants, needs, and desires, and that was healthy. And I would thought myself as a kind person, but definitely a high functioning codependent person.
Yep.
So your work out of everything in my healing process has been really the most impactful. And your book is so well written, but easy with also you have, help with the verbiage and how to go about doing it. So it's fabulous, especially for this audience, because we focus on kind girls and what that tends to be. So that's really great.
Right.
So let's start with the basics. So what is
Okay.
a boundary?
Okay. So I'm going to have you look at your boundaries like your own personal rules of engagement, which means this is how we let other people know what's okay with us and what is not okay with us. So according to me, your boundaries are made up of your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers. And your deal breakers, meaning your non-negotiables in relationships. Now, it's not enough just to know what they are, which I find a lot of women in particular do not even know their preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers. But you have to know what they are and then have the ability to transparently communicate them when you so choose. So that's what boundaries are. What I think a really good question is why do we have no friggin' idea how to
Yes.
do it? Like, why?
Yeah. Where does that come from? I had no concept, no idea, and that it's healthy and it's just changed my life. So
Oh,
why do we not know anything about this?
well, so much of it is the way that we're raised. And we're raised in societies and family systems that it's less problematic for other people if we have bad boundaries. Then we're malleable, we're manipulatable, we are someone that doesn't cause a problem, so to speak. We don't have a big mouth, we're not voicing how we feel about things. And of course, in having disordered boundaries, you also have an unsatisfying life. There's no doubt. You cannot have terrible boundaries and be happy. You're not, because inside you're self-abandoning to keep the peace, as opposed to telling the truth. And the reality is self-abandoning does not keep the peace, right? It might keep external peace, quote unquote, but it's at the expense of your own self-abandonment. So anyone who's listening, anyone who's watching, you feel like if you go, oh my God, forget it. I'm a lost cause. There's no way. There's no way there's help for me with boundaries. I don't know what I'm doing. Of course there's hope for you, because wherever you are right now in your life, even if this is the first time you've ever even heard the word boundary, you're in the exact right position, the exact right place at the exact right time to make the changes that you need to make in your life. And I promise you, Tara is a perfect example, but you can do it. So no matter how hopeless it may seem to you right now, no matter what horrible situation you may find yourself in, or maybe you're just bored. Maybe it's just like more of a malaise, like, ugh, is this all there is with life? No matter where you are, there's more for you. And you've got to be willing to do something different if you want to get something different. And for a lot of us, Tara included, myself included, a lot of times we will have some kind of a healing event or a pivot that happens because something bad happens. It can be a death. It can be destruction. It can be being institutionalized. It can be addiction. It can be, arrested. There's so many things. It can be betrayal. It can be finally being so sick and tired of being sick and tired that you just are like, no, I've got to be done with this. But whatever it is, what I want to say to those of you who feel like down deep, a calling to have better boundaries? Do you feel like you are self-abandoning? What I want to say to you is you don't have to wait until something really bad happens. You really don't. Like, Tara, if you're listening to this podcast, then you have good taste. And you know that what Tara is sharing with you is very valuable, and that she's very authentic, and that she's very down to earth, and that she's telling the truth about her experience, hoping to spare you some of those painful experiences, because that's the same thing that drives what I share, right, Tara? For the same reasons. I share my experience because I hope I can spare you some pain. It doesn't have to be you, right? You don't have to have the excruciating experience. And listen, maybe you do. I don't know. But I do know that in my own life, I've learned from other people's tragedies and traumas. So they didn't have to be my own. And then, of course, I had all my own too. So anyway, I just want to really impart that it's possible for you to change whatever situation you're in that doesn't work. And I guarantee you, learning how to become fluent in the language of boundaries is one of the ways that you're going to change that.
Are you a chronic people pleaser? Do you overgive, overfunction, pretty kind, and you're just tired, or maybe even a little bit resentful? Or are you wondering, like, wow, is this all to life? Is this how it works? Because I kind of feel like I'm going through the motions. Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days to unravel our thinking, beliefs, and live a life intentionally as we connect closer with God, ourselves, and others so we can be more confident and live brighter in this world. And it is learnable. I mean, I would have never thought, but one thing you mentioned is the boundary hangover, which is so true. And I still struggle with that. I had to put a boundary up a little few days ago, and I had that boundary hangover. So explain a boundary hangover and what your advice is to compensate for that.
Sure. Well, when you first start setting boundaries, especially if it's relatively new to you, it's already going to feel like, wow, like everything feels like a big deal, which is why in the book, I give you all the scripts that you need. I give you a 4-step process to do it so that you're prepared. But what happens is when you actually draw the boundary, usually there's a part of you that really wants to take the boundary back. You feel guilty. You feel bad. We're doing a new action, especially if the other person is not thrilled with our boundary and that we're doing it. So what I say is that you have to have a 24 to 48 hour rule, which is that you're not going to take anything back and that you can self-soothe during that time. Be very kind to yourself. Stop ruminating about what you think that person's thinking and what they're doing. And I promise you, it's very unlikely that in 48 hours, you're going to want to take the boundary back. Right. Once we tolerate the beginning of the, ooh, am I being a bad girl? Or, ooh, is somebody going to be mad at me? Once we tolerate that feeling, because to change, we have to tolerate being uncomfortable. It's mandatory. Changing, breaking out of our comfort zone. This, Gay Hendricks talks about like the upper level limit in his book about, what's it called? Taking the Leap, where we can sabotage because we get uncomfortable with the newness or of the expansion. So if you're someone who's used to sort of putting up with crap from other people or taking other people's stuff, and you realize like you don't have to and you don't want to, in the beginning, it's going to feel very threatening to you to say something, to you to be like, yeah, no, this doesn't work for me. I don't want to do this, or I don't like that tone of voice. Please don't use it with me. Because here's the thing with setting boundaries, you guys, that I think that, anyway, I think I wrapped up the boundary hangover, meaning you're going to feel like you want to take it back. All I'm saying is don't take it back. Just give yourself 48 hours and then see how you feel. Because here's the thing, you can always take it back. But once you take it back, it's really hard to put it back in place, So I felt like we wrapped that. And what was I moving into? I can't remember.
So I asked you about that. I want to go back to, you mentioned, first of all, when you're becoming more of a boundary boss and just learning the language, you have to know what your own limits, deal breakers, all of that. That was a
Yeah,
whole learning experience because I was so used to caring more about what other people think and feel than how I
yeah,
think and feel. And then you said
right.
that you have to know it, then you have to put it into a language for the other person. You have to have like kind of consequences or a boundary. So how
Yeah.
do you put that? Give us some verbiage, some examples of how that would look.
hmm Well, I think the simplest way, especially for people just starting, let's do two things. Let's start with the first step on the path to becoming more fluent in the language of boundaries is stopping the auto yes. Because I think that a lot of us have been trained and raised, especially if you religious households, to be very compliant, to do what other people want you to do, to not be a big mouth, to not make any trouble, you know? So that means sort of going along to get along. And I think that we have to stop the auto yes if we're going to have healthy boundaries, because you can't, anything that you're doing automatically is not a conscious choice. So we have to sort of sit back, take a deep breath, and realize, am I an auto yes person? When someone asks something, I'm like, sure, I'll figure it out, or yeah, I can do it. So what we do is we just buy time. The first step is someone asks you to do something, you make a commitment for the next 7 days. You're not immediately agreeing to anything. For the next 7 days, someone asks you to do something for them, you go, hey, you know what? I need to get back to you on that. I want to check in with Mike. I want to check in with my partner. I want to check in with I have to look at my calendar and see if I'm free. You can also say, I have a 24-hour decision-making policy. I'll let you know tomorrow. I want to think about it, right? Like, why is it a crime for us to want to think about a decision? I feel like it shouldn't be, and I feel like it's not a crime. But you may not want to say that. You may just want to say, oh, hey, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'll get back to you on that. So you start to have a few of those little things in your back pocket. We have to be prepared. We have to get proactive. If you want to change the way you're relating to boundaries, we can't just leave it up to what we do in the moment, because what we do in the moment is our habitual reactions. So that's why being proactive is so important, where you're thinking ahead, like, oh, Betty at work always asks me to do crap I don't want to do, or always asks me to pick up the slack for her, and I don't want to. So I'm going to be prepared. The next time she asks me, I'm going to buy time. Be sure enough, Betty's going to ask you to do something you don't want to do. And instead of just agreeing, maybe like you've done in the past, you will immediately say, I actually need to look at my workload right now. I'm not sure that I can take that on, but I'll get back to you tomorrow on it. Super simple. We don't have to be aggressive. We don't have to be mad. We just got to be neutral and straightforward. Just say the words. I have to look at my workload. I'll let you know tomorrow whether I can help you out with that or not. So now we're preparing them for a no. And it's so much easier to say no when you haven't given an automatic yes, because you're not going to want to do that thing that you don't want to do from the moment you said you do it. The closer it gets, the more you don't want to do it. So a lot of times we'll like suddenly get a quote unquote migraine, or, you know what I mean? Like we should not have agreed to do the thing. And sometimes we can't even force ourselves to do the thing, and we find a way to get out of it. But it's not a straightforward way, right? And what you're telling yourself by doing it that way is, I don't have a right to my preferences. And you know what, Tara, you know this as well as I do. You do have a right to your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, because yes, those are the things that make up your boundaries, but they're also the things that make you uniquely you. So they matter. So we've been indoctrinated into this, like you said before, like you were sort of always worried about what other people were thinking. You were indoctrinated into this, oh, I'm easy breezy, going along to get along, no fuss, no muss type of a vibe, with making the assumption that our preference, our desire, what we would like to do is a burden to someone else. And it's not, because what you think, how you feel, what you want matters. And it needs to matter to you more than what anyone else wants, thinks, or feels. And many of us were taught to believe that that type of thinking would be selfish. And I promise you, I've been a psychotherapist for 27 years. It is not. It is not. It is healthy. And this is how we build healthy relationships. Because think about it. If you say yes when you want to say no, if you don't tell the truth about how you feel, if you're upset about something, you are giving the people in your life corrupted information about who you are and how you feel. How are we going to be seen, heard, known? If we do that, how can we ever be loved for who we are if we never let people know who we are?
And that really hit me because, first of all, my people pleasing was dishonest because I wasn't authentic. And then realizing that God created us all uniquely different. And that's exactly how we're created. And that it's actually lying to others when we're not telling them the truth about who we are. So I had to really understand that in a shift way rather than, oh, but it's the kind thing to do. It's the godly thing to do. All the things I would slather over my desires, needs, and how I was feeling until it, destroyed me. So I definitely think that is so helpful. And just having it broken down that way in steps and carefully laid out makes it so much easier to adopt it. And it is a step-by-step situation.
This is what kind girls do, where we think if there's a problem or if someone's upset, must be me. I must do something different. The empaths and the highly sensitive people, which I think a lot of the kind girls fall into those categories, I certainly did, will be just unbelievably attractive to the narcissistic personality type people, because we are perennial givers and they are perennial takers. The most effective way to deal with boundary destroyers and to even know that you're dealing with one is to identify the ways in which they're manipulative, gaslighting you. They're trying to mess with your sanity. And I feel like you might have a little bit of experience in this, Tara, yourself.
Oh, yes.
We need to protect ourselves the way that we would protect a child that we love. Keep in mind, why is someone trying to manipulate anybody emotionally? It's to have power. The more power they have over you, the more power they want over you.
It's just interesting in my family system. It was considered godly to be like the sacrificial person, and that's a generational thing.
Yeah, and has nothing to do with God. That is the opposite of the God that I believe in.
Yes.
Does not want me to be abused by somebody in the name of being holy.
Stay tuned for our next episode.